Okay, this is perfect. I found it. I've been looking for this. It's an interview with Alex Toth from about, I think, the 1980s. Might even be the 1970s. And so I'm interrupting my regular scheduled broadcast of TOTHCARDS to do an interview reading, because I figure lots of people out there would not have seen this. And as you can see, it's yellowing, aging, fading away. Got to scan it. Actually, I did scan it. So I'm going to read it. And it's really interesting. And the relevance will be, it has a lot to say, I think, from what I remember. It has a lot to say that's relevant to the current comics industry and what's happening or not happening. So it's almost like he predicted a lot of this stuff. Now, mind you, none of the independent scene obviously existed back when he wrote this. So these opinions were just about the so-called mainstream that he was observing and partly working in, you know, DC Comics, Marvel. And I think it was even before the rise of independents, like semi-independents back then, like the new players like Image Comics. So he had pretty powerful opinions, Alex Toth, and I think we're going to go ahead and read this. So he says, Opinions by Alex Toth. Manuel Aoud, friend and confidant, has asked that I expose my current views of the state of the art of U.S. comic books, meaning books and strips. So I will. And Manuel, he published these books like this, for what it's worth. Toth black and white. And he knew Alex. I don't know all the details of the back and forth, but he did make an arrangement to publish this book. Okay, so continuing on. Alex says, they're not popular views here, nor perhaps will they be in the Philippine community, but nevertheless, the truth will out eventually. So why not now? My truth, anyhow. And I guess this was for some kind of Filipino magazine. I'm not sure. Someone out there or in the comments might know the exact date and details of that. So please let me know, because I just clipped this and kept it, and I don't have the context for it. So he says, here's his truth. Aside from certain curious experimentations with the format of the continuity strip and comic book being conducted today, I find that adventure action hero strips have never been worse. What's been lost is clear, well-constructed stories of worth and any semblance of similarly credible storytelling on the part of the artists extant today. Thus, we have non-stories being illustrated, in quotes, but not told, exclamation mark, by non-storyteller artists. He's decrying the demise of true cartoon sequential storytelling as opposed to illustrative kind of panels placed side by side that don't form a true narrative story in the way that he would have understood it. By studying his heroes and mentors, like Milton Caniff, Roy Crane, Noel Sickles in particular, and Roy Crane. So continuing on, the lessons of the past have been forgotten or discarded. I'm bored with senseless violence labeled as action and with the ugliness of viewpoint, concept, depiction, motive, and delineation currently in vogue. And with the lunatic characters of normal and or gigantic proportions, fighting on either side of the asinine issues created by writers today in comic books. There is no beauty, no restraint or subtlety, no affection, warmth, humanity, logic, reason, comradeship, respect, or dignity shown by writers or artists that in any way reflect the human condition. It's all just one never-ending ritual of bang, crash, boom. We have enough of this horror in the real world of TV news, newspapers, and news magazines, or just outside our front doors, thank you very much. So I, for one, as I'm sure others will agree, don't want any more. There is, after all, more than just that sort of story to tell. The stuff of life has an endless variety of experiences of interest to us all, in one form or another, and thus I cannot comprehend the reason for every comic book writer in the city of New York to keep hitting the same 2 keys on the keyboard of their common piano, all the while ignoring the other 86 keys, he means, upon which all the greatest symphonies, concerti, tone poems, and etudes could, if so desired, be played rather than just the inane and banal, repetitious plinkings and boomings of those two self-limiting two keys, ad nauseum, ad infinitum. Yeah, he's intense, but he's right. As for the art, like the writing, it's one dismal daisy chain of uninspired, dull, destructive, and negative copycat Me Too-ism, playing the same two keys, boom, boom. There simply is no relief from the meaningless unreality and talentless, over-articulated garbage produced today. It all reads the same, looks the same, is the same. No literary or visual surprises in a warehouse full. No charm, wit, or warmth, or originality, uniqueness, just the heavy, ponderous boom, boom. I can point to American TV, and it continues over here, American TV programming and movies and books and magazines, and make the same point, with thankfully a few exceptions. This overpowering emphasis on all negative aspects in all our media, which will eventually collapse under its own weight. Hey, didn't he predict it? It's happening now. But may bring us all down with it, unless those creative forces for the good of life's views, thoughts, aims, and desires will regain their place in the sun. Their presence will create a balance. We need that balance. God knows. Heavens above, we need that more than ever, don't we? Everything's doom and Satanism and like dark, negative, weirdo demons with horns growing out of their heads. Come on, that's the same two keys, people. Let's have something else. But I'm interjecting my thoughts, and this is meant to be Alex. So here we go. Alex continues. We need that balance. Their light will dispel the shadows of negativism and ugliness. Truth will out. Truth is beauty, clarity, simplicity, and economy. It can stand naked. It needs no embellishment. 30 or 40 years ago, we saw and read evidence of all this in comic books and strips. Works of uplifting qualitative effort, stories of all types, and hundreds of characters of interest and personality, positive heroes, conquering adversity and failure and danger, simply constructed and told stories with art to match. It is with good reason. The best is indeed behind us. Most comic books offered within their covers a variety of stories, heroes, subjects, literary and art styles, approaches, and viewpoints that is unknown today. We relished the many surprises offered by that variety, then available to us from story to story within one magazine. And talk about collapsing and condensing, because if you look at the comic book market, I mean, you've got like, what have you got? You've got the indie people and Comicsgate, good. But then you've got, and even in those spheres, I think we could probably have a much wider array of subjects, but the market may not support that. So of course we have to consider that. In mainstream publishing, you've got graphic novels, but they have certainly banned certain types of stories, particularly boy-friendly action type, or more, whatever the old school would have called it, macho type adventuring. It's more like rainbows and unicorns and, all that kind of stuff. And many sort of preschooler things. There's a very narrow range, if you examine it, of what's acceptable that would be published in graphic novel form by some of those mainstream publishers. And then, well, what else do you have? I don't know, my brain's frying. But I think within each sphere, you do not have the variety of types of subject matter that certainly if you looked at the comic strips that Alex talking about and newspaper comics, there's a huge variety of them. And then traditionally they say that in places like Japan, there's a huge variety of, I don't know to the extent today if that's still true, but there was not only manga of typical, superhero anime type subjects, but lots of other subjects I remember hearing. So he's just making the claim like comics is a medium, it's not one thing like here, superheroes, and then we have the sort of down the line, the devolution of that into what it is today in North American comics. It's a very narrow thing. Anyway, that could be a longer rant, so I'm going to keep reading this. I'll go back a paragraph. Most comic books offered within their covers a variety of stories, heroes, subjects, literary and art styles, approaches, and viewpoints that is unknown today. We relished the many surprises offered by that variety, then available to us from story to story within one magazine. It was delightful to the eye, genuine fun. And again, I'm going to stop myself here, so just forgive me. But I think I said on a stream the other night, the fondest memory which a kid could have, you go into the comic book store. I remember the racks. This would be like in the 60s, of the racks of comics in the stores. They put them lower down so the kid could kneel down. You run in, and I remember this would be in the late 60s, discovering as a 10-year-old, all the wonderful different DC comics. And you were just almost apoplectic because there were so many choices and characters and types of things. And you only had whatever it was, 25 cents to spend, if that, back then, with my parents giving me probably a quarter. I can't remember, a dime. And but it was wonderful. You just had so much to discover. It was like diving into this iridescent pool of all these incredible fantasy adventures. And what do we have now? We don't have anything like that. I mean, that might be a subject of argumentation, but I don't think we have that. Continuing on, we relished the many surprises offered by that variety, then available to us from story to story within one magazine. It was delightful to the eye, genuine fun. The child in me, as well as the man of 50, loves them still. At that time, pre-war, post-war years, so he's talking about before World War II, the 40s. So World War II ending 1945, and starting in, formally 1939 in Britain. But anyway, that's the era, the 30s and the 40s. At that time, pre-war, post-war years, syndicated adventure strips also took many forms and reflected infinite variety of talents who gave us that which we now call the golden age of comics. Today, however, adventure strips are a bore, sad really, literarily and artistically. They are atrocious with very few exceptions. Thus I, like millions of other readers, ignore them in favor of the funny, witty, charming, and warm gag strips, which are delightful and easy to read and enjoy. In today's mad world, they offer us whimsy and a chuckle. It seems all the more noble an effort to create a smile than a frown. Thus, gag strips are rising in popularity, while adventure continuity strips are losing ground and needed space. And he's referring to the fact that they kept trimming the space available to print them, I mean, at one point when you had things like Prince Valiant and many others, you had full-page Sunday comic strips of glorious, size and detail. And they just kept chopping them down as the years went by. And you couldn't really continue an adventure-type comic strip when you had too little space. It seemed to suit the gag format, which, simpler cartoons. So continuing on, as for the new and curious comic book formats presently at work, heavy metal for one, while I applaud their colorful experimentations, I'm aware of their style over substance and character, and thus have reservations as to their genuine merit, for storytelling is still in short supply on those pages. Splashy, impressive art, styling, layout, yes, but solid stories with true continuity art, no, that's the key, see right there, sequential continuity art. There too, talent without disciplined knowledge is at work. Lots of unrelated pictures jammed together or strung out in novel layouts do not make for genuine continuity storytelling. Stories are vague, and so is the art. But at least a beginning's been made to break new ground. The form itself is under fire, evolving anew. Yet I'm old enough to remember what was and weigh that with what is, and realize that I respect the old basic form of the strip and the page with its traditional panel-to-panel flow, dialogue balloons and caption panels or blocks, and the beauty, power, and simple efficiencies of that form, which made sense in italics for emphasis, still does make sense to the creator and his readership. Logical story art progression, and I'd like to see it adhered to by experimentalists today, whose tricky designs and strange copy area placements distract and confuse readers, and destroy panel-to-panel continuity patterns and plot progression of story and art just to be different. I applaud the desire and filling the need, but I seriously question the validity of the result. Our job is communication, to tell a story. Any transmitting device or applied technical method which gets in the way of the transmission, message, story, etc., is a negative element, garbling that which ought to be clear and instantly understood, and ought to be simply stated with economy. Hopefully, Present diffused, confused patterns of writing and art will give way to finding new ways to return to the sound basics of both crafts through simplicity and clarity. In them lies beauty and true art. I've said my piece, one man's opinion as requested. Now let's hear yours. And you know, the thing that comes to mind again is he was so forthright and just didn't mind, and had to. It seemed to be an imperative. He was compelled to tell exactly what he really thought. It's called truthfulness, sincerity. And so you wonder what he would have made not only of today, the negative, because things in many ways have declined, although not completely. I'm not a doomer or black pillar, but I'm a realist. But, you know, in some ways they've declined, but in other ways, of course, there's obviously new opportunities, crowdfunding, streaming, things like that. There are entirely new ways to create comic book properties and get them to fans and connect with fans back and forth. So you wonder what an Alex Toth, if there was some strange time shift, what he would do if he could be here now, or if this stuff had arrived back when he was younger, like writing this, what he would have had to say. Would we have had an Alex Toth streaming every night on alextoth.com, you know, or YouTube channel? That would have been something to hear. And I know his detractors might not have liked that, because he was not one to what you call, suffer fools gladly. If you asked him, like here, whoever, I guess Emmanuel asked him to write down what he thought, he would just go at it guns blazing. And I respect that, because who wants obfuscation and lies and fakeness? You know, it's like, tell me what you think. Okay, here it is, and deal with it. So he obviously had the body of work and the expertise and the understanding of his own craft to really analyze and you know, make statements like this from a different viewpoint. So I think this is gold. I think this is, I hadn't reread this in the longest time. And wow, I remember intuitively thinking this, you know, this is going to apply to today. And as the years have gone by, I remembered this article and I was thinking, yeah, I got to dig that out, because wow, it really, really shows that he foresaw some of these trends. Is like reading the tea leaves, even from back then. And again, I repeat that this was before any of the current stuff, the political changes, obviously, the insane globalism stuff and all that happening. I mean, before all that had its massive effects on us and on these mediums and industries we love, like comic books. He foresaw, even in the corporations of the day, what DC was doing. There are other articles I've got that I'm going to read. You know, he talks about how they didn't preserve their brands. He may have done that in some of the postcards I have, which I'm going to get back to. By the way, there will be more postcards forthcoming. I just thought that this was really urgent to share with people. I may even post scans of it on my Rocket Fiction Instagram or on other social media under Rocket Fiction, of course. So, yeah, please stay tuned. And thanks for listening as ever. I hope you found that interesting and relevant to the raging, roiling, you know, debates and scenery of today as it streams by. If you like this, please like it, share it somewhere for me, comment, and all that other great stuff. Subscribe. Thanks for listening, and see you downstream.